think to call this a war is a misnomer, because no war has been declared by Congress, so we really ought to be calling it an armed conflict or whatever. That's a little beside the point. I'm intimately familiar with the history of Afghanistan going back to Alexander the Great, and they've always resisted foreign invaders. One of the biggest things that we're dealing with at this point is the Indian nuclear deal that George Bush made. The problem with Pakistan and India and Afghanistan is intimately related to balance of power in the area. And we've essentially allowed India to have 2 nuclear power plants where they can make weapons grade whatever with no oversight whatever. And after doing that deal in India, George Bush went to Pakistan and for all intents and purposes put a pig awful pie in the face of Musharraf, the premier, saying, we just did this deal with India and we got nothing for you. That is not a way to treat the balance of power in the area, and it's something that is not being discussed in the current context. And we clearly have things that we owe to Afghanistan because we abandoned them at the end of Charlie Wilson's war. And for what it's worth, my mother dated Charlie Wilson way before then, back in the 1950s, when I was an 8-year-old kid in Ohio. I met the guy and toured a ship. But yes, we have obligations to the Afghan people. We need to help them, but it's an area that historically has never really allowed itself to a centralized government out of a particular place. It's tribal. The borders there are entirely arbitrary. The question has to do with what do we do about the India-Pakistan nuclear deal.
Thank you.
It's not
Yeah.
I can say something about declaration of war.
Talk about declarations of war. Anyone know the last time we declared war on anybody? 68 years ago. As an Italian American, I'm saddened that Italy's the last country we declared war on. But there's been a lot of war ever since. And I think that really wasn't a question about India, Pakistan. I think it's a point well taken that India has been shown some nuclear favoritism. And Pakistan has been shown a lot of fear and concern, and the best we've done is maybe help them with something called permissive access links that keep the nuclear weapons from being used illicitly, because there is concern about a revolution in that country. And I think that doesn't require a further answer from me.
Let me just add that there is a lot of money involved with India. India is good business. Call your credit card, you're talking to India. India is a vibrant, huge economy and is good business. Pakistan is not good business. Pakistan drains the US. The US has to pay Pakistan. India, the tax dollars come back. So that's the big difference in cash.
There was another question. Oh, back there. Yeah.
I'll be brief. On Al-Qaeda and its network, obviously it's not really in Afghanistan right now. It's partly in Pakistan. It spreads amoeba-like. So if you succeed, if one succeeds in Afghanistan and Pakistan, that doesn't defeat Al-Qaeda. So if you could just discuss what actually defeats Al-Qaeda, if not the military engagement that we're in right now.
Well, I think Shamsia put it very well before. Take away the narrative, the story they have. They can point to examples like what was done in Lebanon 27 years ago, and what was done in Palestine and has been done on a continuing basis there. You want to fight their story that they tell about oppression. So if we behave a little more circumspectly and ethically, there's less recruitment to the cause. But basically, there's no easy answer. We have to get good. As Zara said earlier, we've gotten better at tracking networks. That's what we have to do. That's the business of military affairs now, in a world where the principal opponents, we're not going to get attacked by other nations, because we're just hell at whacking nations. We know how to do that very well. But we're not good at fighting networks, and that's why the networks are springing up. And so we're getting a little better. I'm associated with the creation of something called the Global Counter-Terror Network. which started as a project of one of my graduate students. And that leads to some of these things that I've alluded to a little bit earlier. But that's the nature of conflict in this century. And it is not easy because it's all about hider and finder, right? And war is no longer mass against mass. It's now, if you can't find them, you can't fight them. We're getting a little better at finding, but lots more to be done.
I just wanted to make a comment in there too when you were talking about the narrative that Al-Qaeda has. Is that I once heard the United States described as USA standing for United States of Amnesia, and that we, 5 minutes later we've forgotten it. But what we tend to also forget is that in other cultures, history is important, and what's happened in the past is important, and past transgressions are remembered. And so I think we need to keep that in mind. I saw you back there in the start.
Okay, I have a 3 little part question here. Okay, I'm not understanding how the issue in Kashmir would be used against the United States. That conflict between whatever it is, India, Pakistan. I'm not understanding how Taliban or Al-Qaeda could use that to argue and mobilize against the United States. That's number 1. Can I ask 3 little questions here?
As long as they're quick.
Okay, and so that's 1. And the second is, since we keep reading that Pakistan is more concerned about India than the Taliban, and that, from what I've read, the Pakistanis want to keep sort of a relationship with the Taliban in case they need their support against India. Why are we not dealing with that directly? And then the third question is, why don't we have more international support for this? Anyways.
There is a lot of rage in the Muslim world.
I can't hear
A lot
you.
of rage in Muslim world. The Muslim world is angry because they feel that this goes across religious and class divide. Middle class, lower class, traditional, and they are under siege. The Indians captured Kashmir. Israelis have occupied Palestine. Americans walk all over Iraq. Anybody who wants to do anything to Muslims, they can do it. And Muslim leadership, Muslim armies, Muslim resources, they are vulnerable. They are under siege. So there is this anger as a result of that. That anger creates a narrative. That narrative is utilized to convince people to do these things that they do. Suicide bombing, slamming planes into buildings, and there is no end. One person comes in, another person is lining up to go the west. There is no shortage. This points to the anger. So I think what Shamsia was saying, and I would like to concur and
But
emphasize.
specifically about Kashmir, how do we
It's
get
not,
involved in
it's
that?
not just Kashmir.
No, I know.
Kashmir is one of them. Palestine, I think, even more important than Kashmir is Palestine.
Right, but I'm not understanding how they use Kashmir to mobilize.
Kashmir, half of Kashmir is under India. They were supposed to have, after the partition, they were supposed to have a plebiscite there and an election there, so that the Kashmiris would decide whether they would go with Pakistan, whether they would go with India, or whether they will have independence. So what happened was that India took over part of Kashmir and Pakistan took the other part, and they said no elections. That is the only part of India which in 1947 had a majority Muslim population. The rest of Indian states, which created the Republic of India, had minority Muslims, not majority. All the majority Muslim areas of India went with Pakistan or with Bangladesh on the other side. So Kashmir is the only place that was left. There was an agreement to have an election there. The Indians prevented them and are preventing it today.
And we're linked with the Indians? Is that it? Is that how we get?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's see, you have an